The Psi Corps was an Earth Alliance organization, ostensibly established to help human telepaths learn how to control and use their abilities for the betterment of themselves and humanity at large. Terminology. Blip, a general term used by security officers for fugitives from the law, though it has also become synonymous with rogue telepaths. Type A blips are considered to be merely misguided and open to re-education. Type C blips are those who are considered sociopaths or born criminals, who enjoy abusing their abilities and are much more difficult to re-educate. Latent, referring to a telepath who has scored positive on the screening test, but whose ability has not yet manifested. Also called late bloomers. Mundane, non-telepath, meaning literally normal. Often pejorative. Teep, referring to any telepath. Scan, an active telepathic probe. Surface scans, while difficult for even a trained P5 to detect, can only reveal what a person happens to be thinking from moment to moment and is routinely used in business negotiations to detect facades, omission and obfuscation. A deep scan, while often uncomfortable, can uncover deeper thoughts and memories. Under certain conditions, deep and extended scans can cause seizures, heart attacks, strokes, permanent brain damage, or if the subject is particularly resistant, death. Sustaining and blocking extended scans can also affect the telepath running the scan. The best human telepaths can only sustain a deep scan for up to 40 to 45 minutes, at which time they burst arteries, have strokes, or black out. Block, telepathic guard against active scanning or passive sensing. Blocks usually take the form of repeating songs, nursery rhymes, or mathematical calculations. With training, mundanes can also use these techniques to block an active scan, although the mundane's ability to resist depends on how strong the telepath is. Blocks can be broken by a sufficiently strong and/or well-trained teep. However, doing so forcefully can lead to the subject suffering strokes, aneurysms or cerebral hemorrhaging. This can also refer to subconscious conditioning that restrains a subject at the point of action. The kith, or the family, as they sometimes called themselves, were a tight-knit group of nomadic rogue telepaths, running from one home to another, living however they could, always staying one step ahead of the mundanes. Often living under assumed names, holding down low-paying jobs, other time operating as mercenaries, con artists, grifters and occasionally thieves. When the group ultimately split, they would go on to have a significant impact on the formation of both the telepath resistance and the Psi Corps. Culture of the Corps. Psi Corps culture naturally grew out what had already been established by the Metasensory Regulation Authority, some of which came straight from the kith. The phrase perhaps most synonymous with the Corps is mother, the Corps is father, came from MRA agent Daisa Alexander, who along with her fellow kith made a definite impression on Corps culture. She was frequent to remind her charges while training and tracking down blips that the kith is mother. The kith is father. Another tradition that began with Alexander and one followed by many was the passing of family names within the Corps along the female line, rather than the male. Referred to as mitochondrial descent, the reason behind it was because the marker for the telepath gene was encoded within a teep's mitochondrial DNA. As such, Lita Alexander could trace her lineage back 6 generations to Daisa herself, while Talia Winters inherited her name from former Blip and Resistance member Jenny Winters. The practice was not totally pervasive, however, and by the 2250s it had become something only really associated with the older families of the Corps. Children raised by the Corps were quickly and thoroughly indoctrinated. Raised mostly in Teep Town, they were kept in small groups or cadres where they were instilled with a sense of belonging and loyalty to a larger body, discouraging individual thinking and other solitary activities. Latents, children who had tested positive as Teeps but had yet to manifest their Psi abilities, were kept in a separate dorm, sometimes called the basement, often shunned and rarely mixing with the others. However, once their talents manifested, they would quickly be integrated into a proper cadre. Young Teeps were taught that they were rare, special, and better than mundanes, and that 2 Teeps should never be seen fighting in front of a normal. It is the position of the Psi Corps that telepathic humans who do not learn how to control their abilities are mostly unstable or become insane, therefore they need guidance. In addition to that, unregistered telepaths can do severe damage to society by using their abilities for criminal reasons. Under Earth Alliance law, all human telepaths have to be registered with the Psi Corps. After that, they have 3 choices: join the Psi Corps, lifetime imprisonment, or take drugs called sleepers to suppress their abilities. Most choose to work for Psi Corps, because one common side effect of the sleepers is severe depression, sometimes so severe that it often ends in the patient's suicide. Unstable telepaths, such as schizophrenic ones, are locked away for the good of everyone. Always an insular organization, Psi Corps would always try to deal with incidents, or family matters, concerning telepaths internally and try to avoid interference by mundanes. Believing that as long as normals were kept convinced nothing goes wrong behind these walls, they would be left alone. Propaganda. To strengthen the dedication of telepaths to the Corps, there are a variety of slogans that shall remind the telepaths that Psi Corps is their family, the Corps is mother, the Corps is father. The Psi Corps is your friend. Trust the Corps. We are everywhere for your convenience. Protect the family. Obey. Trust the Corps. Maternis, paternis. United in thought, revered in memory. Resources. Psi Corps facilities were spread across the Earth Alliance, from the Corps headquarters in Earthdome to a secret intelligence center in Syria Planum on Mars. The facilities at Earthdome featured hospitals, offices, and the Psi Corps Academy where young teeps and teeks were trained to make the best of their talents. Located nearby in Geneva was Teep Town, an enclosed community the size of a large village. Built out from the old MRA metasensory compound, this was where new members, mostly children, were indoctrinated into the culture and thinking of Psi Corps. Unknown to many at the time, Psi Corps secretly maintained a series of motherships that remained in hyperspace. Ferrying Psychops back and forth on missions, the motherships only exited to normal space when maintenance and repairs were essential and could be done unobserved. Psi Corps. Psi Corps is the collective name for officers of the Metasensory Police, or Metapol, and were the police enforcement arm of Psi Corps, usually dealing with cases relating to telepaths, mostly rogues and blips. All Psi Corps are P12s, the highest, natural, rating within the Psi scale, but not every P12 has the ability to become a Psi Corp, because it takes a certain amount of ruthlessness. Psi Corps receive a special training in blocking and scanning so that they are able to resist a deep scan for at least an hour. Following the dissolution of the Psi Corps at the end of the Telepath War, the role of the Psi Corps was divided between the new Bureau of Telepath Integration and the new Metasensory Division of the Earth Alliance Bureau of Investigation. Bloodhound Units. Bloodhound units are specially trained telepaths under the authority of the Psi Corps, used to hunt down fugitives through empathic tracking and scanning of witnesses, informants and suspects. The origins of the Bloodhound units go back to the days of the Metasensory Regulation Authority and a group of agents led by Dasa Alexander, also known as Blood. Up until President Morgan Clark's increased dependence on the Psi Corps for civil intelligence gathering and Black Ops, the Bloodhounds were kept within the Corps, tracking blips and occasionally protecting their own. One such incident occurred around 2253, when a serial killer murdered a string of commercial telepaths. With the mundane authorities seemingly uninterested in catching the perpetrator, the Psi Corps took matters into its own hands without such encumbrances as warrants, permission or due process. Illegally scanning anyone who might have a lead, the Bloodhounds left behind no traces save for lingering memory gaps, missing hours and headaches, eventually finding the killer. Reasoning that turning him over to the proper authorities would require an explanation as to how they found him, the Corps had him sent to an institution on Beta Colony instead, but not before they implanted visions and hallucinations in his mind so terrifying that he would spend the rest of his days and nights screaming at things that only he could see. To prevent him from clawing his own eyes out, he was kept in a straitjacket 24 hours a day. During the Earth Alliance Civil War, Bloodhound units were assigned to the Earth Force military divisions and bases occupying Mars. Anyone suspected of being a member of the Resistance was subjected to a very deep scan. Given the nature of such invasive scans, they were prone to causing heart attacks, seizures, strokes, and even death. In 2262 the Bloodhound units were dispatched alongside Alfred Bester to hunt down Byron's dissident telepaths. History. Early history. The beginnings of the Corps date back to 2117 and the formation of the Metasensory Regulation Authority, itself an outgrowth of the 2115 Senate Committee on Technology and Privacy and the subsequent Committee on Metasensory Regulation. In 2156, following first contact with the Centauri Republic and the revelation that the Centauri and many other alien races possessed telepaths, it became apparent that Earth would need a more permanent and comprehensive solution than the MRA was able to provide. What finally tipped the balance of public opinion was the self-sacrifice of Earth Force Security Commander William Corgs in thwarting of an assassination attempt on EA President Elizabeth Robinson in October of 2160. Corgs had been an unregistered telepath and had used his ability to sense the thoughts of the bombers before they could detonate the president's motorcade. With this swing in public opinion concerning telepaths, which had until this point had been at its lowest since the pogroms of 2115, on April 12, 2161, President Robinson was finally able to realize what Senator Lee Crawford had been working toward for decades and institute universal registration for Earth Alliance telepaths and an independently charted MRA, dubbed Psi Corps. Though the Corgs incident is often credited by Psi Corps propaganda as the deciding factor, more cynical students of history have compared it to George Washington chopping down a cherry tree. Robinson immediately offered Crawford the position of director of the Psi Corps, though his tenure was short-lived, as on May 19, 2161, Crawford was assassinated while on his way to a meeting with Earth's first Centauri ambassador. Kevin Vassett, Crawford's assistant of nearly 30 years, became the new director. While its public image was always that of a friendly service to society, though the facade was at times rather thin, under Vassett's direction, Psi Corps was fashioned into a keenly balanced machine, dedicated to honing and cultivating telepaths for the inevitable day when coexistence with mundanes would become a matter of survival. So adept was he at setting the Corps on its course that it could continue without him and without even knowing its true purpose. Collaboration with the Shadows. Dr. Stephen Franklin participated in an underground railroad to help rogue telepaths escape from the Corps. Eventually, some of the telepaths who escaped provided assistance during the closing days of the Second Shadow War, while the highest levels of the Corps allied itself with the Shadows, providing them with captured rogue telepaths to operate on and surgically alter. Via Morden, the Shadows took an active role in the assassination of Luis Santiago, allowing some of their technology to be used by Earth Force. After the Shadows and Vorlons left the galaxy with the other First Ones and Clark's defeat following the end of the Earth Alliance Civil War, a group of rogue telepaths led by Byron formed a small colony on Babylon 5, granted sanctuary by ISA President John Sheridan. The situation later ended in violence when the Psi Corps attempted to take the rogue telepaths back to Earth. Telepath War. After the colony on Babylon 5 was forced to leave following the death of its leader, Byron, Lita Alexander began a crusade against the Psi Corps. Her actions led to a conflict in which both rogue telepaths and mundanes fought against the Psi Corps. This conflict would later become known as the Telepath War. Having lost the power it held during the Clark administration, the Psi Corps attempted to take over Earth's government, but eventually was defeated by the Earth Alliance, aided by the Interstellar Alliance and the rogue telepaths. Aftermath. Following the end of the Telepath War, Psi Corps was formally dissolved, and the Earth Alliance began to take steps to reintegrate its telepaths into mainstream society. Freeing them from many of the past rules and restrictions, TEEPs were now allowed a much wider range of options as to what they chose to do with their lives, such as serving in Earth Force and working in the private sector. Many private schools were set up to educate telepaths around this time, though their success rate was somewhat mixed. After the dissolution of Psi Corps, the Psionic Monitoring Commission was created, dedicated to hunting down those members of the Corps who had committed war crimes such as Alfred Bester. Eventually captured and put on trial for his past atrocities, Bester was sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison, his abilities taken away by the very sleepers that he once administered to countless blips. Some Psi Corps members, like John Matheson, joined later Earth Force.